Is it fair to say that the greatest fraud check of all time happened on Saturday when Andrew Tate lost to Chase Damore? He should have never taken this fight. If there was any sort of doubt about him winning, he should have never taken this fight.
This wasn't just a loss, it was a full-on public collapse. For years, Andrew Tate built an entire empire on one loud promise. He never breaks, never bends, never loses. He's the unshakable one, the man who stays standing when everyone else falls. But that perfect, bulletproof image, it shattered in one brutal night. And it wasn't even his opponent that shocked the world. It was him. The look on his face, the drained energy, the heavy silence. Everything felt off, like watching a mask fall apart in real time. What came after that fight sent everything spinning out of control. Because the meltdown didn't end when the final bell rang. It kept rolling louder and messier. And the real story behind that night goes way deeper than most people realize. This wasn't just about boxing, this was personal. Tate didn't climb into that ring for sport. He did it for survival, for dominance, for the image he built and refused to let go of. He needed to prove he was still that guy, the one untouchable alpha the internet couldn't tear down. On paper, the setup looked flawless. A seasoned striker with years of training against a flashy reality TV name with barely any ring experience. Everyone thought it was going to be easy. Quick knockout, huge win, and instant headlines. A victory would have changed everything. More fights, more money, more attention, a clean reset on his whole reputation. But when the lights hit and the truth showed itself, what happened next flipped the script completely. From the very first bell, something just felt off.
And now he's going online and he's doing the babyface thing of like, you have to live, and I'd rather try and fail. No, that's not who you are. Your persona has nothing to do with failure. Your persona is about winning. Your persona is about achieving wealth and success. Your persona is not about trying, and hey, if you don't succeed, you gave it the old college try. That is the antithesis of everything that you have spewed over the past 5 or so years. So miss me with the like, I'm proud of myself for trying, and I went in there against the champion who's really good. No, you didn't. You went in there and you looked awful and you failed. And so just be honest about that.
His rhythm wasn't there. The power looked drained, the energy felt wrong, and by round 3, it was like the fight had already left him. Instead of attacking, he was retreating. Instead of dominating, he was just trying to survive out there. That's when everyone watching realized this comeback wasn't going the way it was supposed to, not even close. But the worst part wasn't what happened in the ring. It was what came after. Because the real collapse didn't happen during the punches, it happened the moment Tate started talking. Once he grabbed that mic, the entire illusion cracked wide open. Losing was never part of his plan, and when it happened, he looked stunned, almost lost, like someone who'd trained for every scenario except the one where he actually fails. He tried to keep his cool, tried to sound respectful, even gave his opponent some credit. But it was obvious, his confidence was shaking. If you really listen, the pauses tell the story. His voice dragged, the timing was off, every sentence felt forced. And then came the line that changed everything. He said, I got tired, not hurt, not outperformed, just tired. That one word set the internet on fire. Because how could he, the man who bragged about being unstoppable, be tired by round 3? The same guy who preached about endless discipline, perfect conditioning, and unbreakable focus was now gasping for air. Hands down, footwork gone, and stamina completely shot. Even the commentators didn't hold back. They questioned his training, his mindset, and some flat out said it. This wasn't a bad night. This was a wake-up call. Suddenly, the story flipped from legend returns to legend exposed. And then came the final twist. Instead of just admitting it, instead of saying, yeah, I wasn't ready, he paused. And that hesitation, it was fatal for his image. Because when your entire brand is built on absolute confidence,
I want to get spiritual about all of this. You have to understand that there are forces larger than us people. And I said that the answer was already written. Why did I get tired? I don't know. It doesn't make sense. The only thing that makes sense is that I was not supposed to win. Why was I not supposed to win? Is the world a better place now that I've lost? Maybe the win means more to Chase than it would have meant to me. Maybe Chase couldn't handle the loss.
Even one excuse sounds like a confession, and the words that came next, they shocked everybody. Even his most loyal fans couldn't believe what they were hearing. That's the exact moment the empire of toughness started to crumble, and nothing after that would be the same again. The real battle wasn't in the ring. It was in his head. Losing wasn't part of the plan. There was no backup strategy, no what-if moment, no blueprint for defeat. On camera, he kept his composure, said all the polite things, even smiled like it didn't sting. But underneath, it was chaos. You could see the hesitation creeping in, the excuses stacking up one by one. First, it was ring rust, then age, then timing, then even subtle digs at how his opponent leaned too much. It was a whole list of reasons. Everything got blamed except the one thing that actually mattered: preparation. And that's what made it sting even more. Because this is the same man who built his entire empire preaching about accountability. The same voice that used to mock anyone who made excuses. The guy who once said, "Winners don't blame the world." And now suddenly it looked like nothing was his fault. He kept insisting his training was flawless, his body in peak shape, that he did everything perfectly. But if that's true, then why was he exhausted halfway through the fight? That question just hung there, heavy and uncomfortable, and the internet didn't miss a beat. The clips spread everywhere. Old quotes resurfaced. People started putting them side by side, and the contrast was painful. This was the same man who once laughed and said, "What do you call someone who loses? A loser." And now here he was, explaining why losing didn't really count. But instead of leaving it at that, he went further, way further. He didn't just defend the loss, he rebranded it.
Maybe God decided, you know what, Chase has been through enough with mocking and things on the internet. Chase doesn't need the loss right now. Andrew can handle the loss better. Maybe God decided. Maybe if I won, we would have went out and celebrated that night, and Tristan would have smoked a bunch of cigars, and maybe he would have died 1 minute earlier. And maybe I get an extra minute with my brother because I lost. And if that's the case, then I'm glad I lost.
Suddenly, this wasn't about boxing anymore. It was about destiny, energy, and the universe deciding outcomes. He started talking like it was all spiritual, like fate had stepped in, not failure, as if the universe had written it that way from the start. It was a dramatic twist that left people stunned, because what began as a fight suddenly turned into a full-blown philosophy lesson on cosmic purpose. Think about that for a second. This is the same man who used to preach that discipline is everything. The guy who said effort separates winners from losers. That mindset decides destiny. But now, suddenly, discipline didn't matter anymore. Losing wasn't failure, it was sacrifice. That shift hit people like a shockwave because this didn't sound like confidence or growth anymore. It sounded like someone desperately trying to hold together a shattered version of themselves. The top G image was built on dominance, control, and certainty. It never made space for weakness or loss. But now, his tone was different. No arrogance, no mocking, no swagger, just fatigue. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a fight, but from something deeper. That's when fans started asking the question nobody expected. If the universe decides who wins, then what happens to the man who swore he controlled everything? Because once you hand that power away, you can't just grab it back. That's when the shift got even louder. And it all came down to money. He made sure everyone heard it. He was still rich, still living good, still winning in life. The loss, he said, didn't matter. But listen closely, because that's where the contradiction hits hardest.
I have to have faith in a higher power. There's a lesson in all of this. And I don't need to know exactly what it is. If God decides that for some reason he's going to instantly gas me when I was in perfect physical condition so that I lose, then I have to accept God's decision. And I'll take the punches in the face like a man. And I'm not going to bitch, I'm not going to complain, and I'm not going to cry. I'm going to take it. God decided on that day that that's what has to happen to me, so I did it.
For years, winning was everything. Dominance was the brand. Legacy was the entire flex. And now, suddenly, none of it mattered. People started catching on fast. When he wins, it's superiority. When he loses, it's irrelevant. When he dominates, it's discipline. When he fails, it's fate. That's not strength, that's coping. And then came the twist nobody saw coming. The backlash wasn't just from critics anymore. It came from his own supporters. The same people who defended him, reposted his clips, shouted his slogans, they were now the ones asking hard questions. If the training was perfect, why was his stamina gone so early? If discipline controls everything, why do the same rumors about inconsistency keep circling? That's when it hit everyone. Maybe this wasn't about one fight at all. Maybe the real battle was about holding on to an image that no longer matched the reality. By this point, the whole situation had exploded online. The clips, the interviews, the fan edits, they were everywhere. People weren't just talking about the fight anymore, they were dissecting every word, every pause, every blink he made after that loss. Because what started as a single night in the ring had turned into a public unraveling of the entire Top G myth. For years, Andrew Tate built himself as the blueprint for dominance. The man who never bends, never doubts, never breaks. His voice, his image, his message, all of it was about control. Control over your life, your emotions, your outcomes. He made discipline sound like a superpower, like something that could protect you from ever feeling weak again. But now, the mask was slipping.
If you're going to go through life without understanding that there's a grander plan, a plan that's bigger than just you and your ego. The plan is bigger than just us and our egos, guys. The plan is bigger than just, I want to win. So I have to have what I want, like a spoiled child, and what God decides and what's good for the universe and what's good for people to learn from and what's good for the general karmic retributions of the planet. Fuck all that. I want to win so that no one on the internet laughs at me.
And people could finally see the cracks underneath. It wasn't just the fight that people were reacting to, it was how human he suddenly looked. The calm confidence was replaced with confusion. The quick comebacks replaced with long, searching pauses. He looked like someone realizing, in real time, that his own script no longer worked. And the internet noticed everything. Because this wasn't a small slip. It was a full identity crisis. Caught live and replayed millions of times. People started comparing his old clips. The ones where he'd boast about never folding under pressure, never making excuses, never losing focus. Then they'd splice them right next to footage of him out of breath, shaking his head, saying it was just fatigue. The contrast was brutal, and it wasn't the haters doing this. Even longtime followers admitted something had changed. The conversation shifted from Tate lost a fight to Tate lost control. And that's a dangerous shift for someone whose whole empire was built on control. The man who always claimed to be 5 steps ahead suddenly looked cornered. Not by an opponent, but by his own words. Because when your brand is built on invincibility, the moment you show cracks, people don't see humanity, they see contradiction. Even some of his biggest supporters started asking questions out loud. Where was the legendary conditioning? Why did he look winded so early? And why, if discipline ruled everything, was he now talking about destiny, fatigue, and timing instead of accountability? Those questions spread like wildfire. And for once, there were no clean answers. Then came the bigger realization. This wasn't just about one loss. It was about what that loss represented. For years, Tate had used wins, money, and confidence as proof of his philosophy. If I win, my beliefs work. If I'm rich, my system is right. But when that system gets publicly tested and fails, it forces people to reevaluate everything they've been told to believe. And suddenly, the conversation turned philosophical. Not about fighting, but about ego. People started saying this was the first time the top G faced something he couldn't control, something that money, fame, or dominance couldn't fix. For the first time, he couldn't shout his way out, couldn't flex his way through, he had to face it. That's where the internet split in two. Some people said, this is his growth moment. He's finally showing humility. Others said, no, this is survival mode. He's rebranding failure as destiny to protect his ego. Both sides had receipts. Both had passion. And both refused to back down. But underneath all of it, one truth kept echoing. This moment changed everything. Because for the first time, people saw that the man who told millions how to win couldn't handle losing. That shook the image to its core. It's not that people stopped watching, and in fact, they watched more. But the tone shifted. The aura of invincibility turned into curiosity. People started tuning in not to be inspired, but to see what he'd say next, how he'd spin the story. Then came the follow-up interviews. The mood was different, colder, calculated, rehearsed. He doubled down on being unfazed, said losing was part of a greater plan. But the internet doesn't forget, and those earlier cracks in his armor were still replaying everywhere. The memes, the comment threads, the analysis videos, they turned his every sentence into a debate. That's when another thing became clear. This wasn't just about the fight's outcome. It was about his grip on influence. When you build a movement on dominance, people don't just follow your words, they follow your energy. And now that energy was fractured. He could still talk confidence, but people could feel the uncertainty in between the lines. It's wild, because the same man who told others to embrace discomfort was visibly uncomfortable now. The one who said emotions are weakness was suddenly emotional. The one who said excuses are for losers was listing reasons. And the one who said winners control reality was now saying the universe controls outcomes. That shift didn't go unnoticed. Even other influencers began to chime in. Some defended him, saying, at least he showed up and fought. Most people wouldn't. Others weren't so kind, calling it the most public identity meltdown of the year. The backlash grew messy, but the deeper story wasn't about public opinion. It was about what happens when your public image and private truth finally collide. Behind the scenes, those closest to him hinted that the loss hit harder than he let on. That it wasn't just about physical exhaustion, it was about what it symbolized. For someone who built his whole empire on dominance, defeat wasn't just a bruise. It was a full crack in the foundation. And that's something no PR statement could hide. The most surprising part? Fans didn't turn away completely. They got louder, because people don't just love seeing someone win, they love seeing how they handle falling apart. It's messy, real, unpredictable. And for the first time, Tate wasn't in control of the story. The internet was. Every post, every clip, every comment turned into a public referendum on everything he's ever stood for. And that's what made this fight different. It wasn't about one night in the ring, it was about the myth of perfection finally meeting reality. The man who taught millions how to never break was finally broken. Not by a punch, but by the weight of his own legend. And as people kept replaying that moment, one truth stood out clear as day. When you build your entire empire on the idea that losing is impossible, the first loss isn't just a stumble, it's an earthquake. Because once people see you bleed, they never look at you the same way again. Once the armor finally cracked, everything started getting questioned. Old clips got replayed, past wins got re-examined, and suddenly, the myth didn't look so untouchable anymore. It didn't fall apart overnight. It wobbled first. But once doubt creeps in, it spreads fast. This wasn't just a bad night in the ring anymore. This was a full-on credibility collapse. You could even hear it in his voice afterward. No spark, no fire, no chest-thumping confidence, just exhaustion. The kind that comes from realizing the mask doesn't fit anymore. This wasn't a breakdown because of a loss. It was because the character he built might not protect him now. That's the real twist. This was never truly about boxing. It was about identity. When everything you sell is built on control and dominance, a single moment of defeat doesn't just bruise, it exposes. For years, Andrew Tate pushed the idea that discipline, effort, and mindset could bend reality itself. That if you worked hard enough, you could never lose. But this moment shattered that illusion. Not because he lost, but because he couldn't explain the loss without rewriting his own rules. So now the question everyone's asking is simple. Was this just one bad night? Or was it the moment the myth finally cracked for good? Because when you build your empire on perfection, even one visible fracture changes everything. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. And I'll see you on the next one.